Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Sarah, and today's episode is about using light technology for anti-aging, healing, sleep and mood. My guest today is David Schmidt, who's a polymath, inventor of LifeWave technology with over 180 patents to his name. David created LifeWave in order to develop methods to increase energy, lower inflammation, slow down aging and improve the outcome of chronic illnesses, without having to resort to potentially harmful drugs and medication. David and his company are involved in many areas of active research, and one of them is anti-aging, because David firmly believes that we can significantly enhance human health span as well as human lifespan. We're joined in this podcast by Dr. Rachel Maurice, who's an MD with several decades of clinical practice. Welcome to the channel, David. It's a great pleasure to have you here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, well, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure. I'm looking forward to our time together. My name is David Schmidt. I'm the CEO and founder of LifeWave. And also an inventor. I think I've just crossed 200 patents. My staff tells me this week. And I've worked on everything from energy production, new designs in batteries, fuel cells, turbine systems, electric motors, now generators, light therapy devices, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, nutritional supplements, polymers. I think there's probably a few others, but that's pretty good. And currently, LifeWave is #1 fastest growing company in the world in our industry. And we're a global company that distributes our products in over 80 countries. And over the past 20 years of performing research, we have now over 90 clinical studies on our products for phototherapy. And I think we have a very novel approach of applying light both to the body and light from inside the body. So that's probably a good way to get started.
Yes, I think we're going to be talking about light therapy, but also using a new patented water that delivers light. So maybe if you start off with what's light and why is light signaling so important in the human body and also just in nature in general?
So, of course, a traditional definition of light is that it's a form of electromagnetic energy made up of particles and waves. Particles are photons. And what's extraordinary about photons is that only 2 or 3 packets can activate receptors in the human body. And this occurs through a transfer of energy through, let's say, a chromophore. So in the human body, and we don't normally think about it this way, we'd say at a very simplistic level, we know we go out in the sun and we can get a suntan. So there's evidence of the interaction between light and a chemical change, a biochemical change in the body. For men, I think the thing they're always interested in is during the summer, they take their shirt off, they get some UV light up on the androgen receptors in their shoulders, and that's an effective means for increasing testosterone levels. So we know that light can induce biochemical changes in the body. How does that actually happen? On an extremely basic level, there are chromophores in the human body that absorb light. So in the mitochondria, in the electron transport chain, towards the end of the electron transport chain, we have cytochrome C oxidase. And that is a chromophore that will absorb visible light. And the energy that molecule absorbs is transferred through an electron bucket brigade. And this helps in the conversion of making more ATP. So beyond this, we think of visible light as electromagnetic energy between 400 nanometers and 700 nanometers. And above 400 nanometers, we get into the UV bands, UVA, B, and C. And we associate that with light, even though it's outside the visible range, we can't see it. On the other side, when we go below 700 nanometers, now we get into the near and the far infrared bands. And of course, this is still light, even though, again, we can't see it. but it's extraordinarily important because of the implications that infrared light can have on our health. So namely, 850 nanometers is a wavelength that is known to improve mitochondrial function. So this information is extraordinarily important because with light being a master control mechanism within the human body, we can use light as medicine. We can use light to improve the health of the mitochondria, the health of our cells, and balance out energy systems in the body.
Okay, that leads us very nicely into your flagship product, which is the X39, and we may go sort of deepish into the science of how it works. But maybe just for somebody who's never heard of your technology, how would you describe this technology? Because it took you such a long time to develop it, yet it looks so simple.
Yeah, I started back in the 90s. Originally, this was a product that was intended to be a piece of survival equipment for Navy SEALs that were going to be on a mini sub. And then when 9/11 happened, the world got turned upside down. And the only thing US was really interested in at the time was weapons. So I took the technology out into the public, and that happened in around 2002. And I've been working on LifeWave ever since. So the basic concept behind this is that we can take stereoisomers of amino acids and sugars and process them in a very specific way so that when activated by body heat, they will reflect very specific wavelengths of light. So our body is giving off light all the time. We give off infrared light as a result of the process of metabolism, and we're giving off biophotons. The source of these biophotons is rather interesting because it comes from the cell nucleus, and they're laser-like coherent emission of light that will induce and initiate biochemical changes in the cell. So this is coming off of the body, and we can actually directly correlate the age of human beings with biophoton emission from the body. But in any case, the patches act as a reflector of these very low levels of light and a filter, and will stimulate the skin with select wavelengths of light. And this is in harmony with a code that exists within the human body. So what we're able to do with the technology is selectively turn on the production of specific antioxidants like glutathione or carnosine, or in the case of X39, we can turn on production of copper peptide, GHKCU, which is a very powerful modulator of genes in the body.
Okay, because there are very important molecules in the body, why did you choose a copper peptide to be the sort of first gene or protein to be expressed? What's so special about copper?
Well, historically, to know the answer to that, historically, the type of things I was working on initially 20 years ago were products to improve quality of life, improve energy production through elevated beta oxidation, support pain relief, improve the quality of sleep. And that's how the company got started. After that, I became interested in looking at how we might use the technology for anti-aging applications. And so a period of time went by where I developed products to elevate glutathione, the body's master antioxidant, carnosine, which is a very powerful dipeptide to improve cognition and athletic performance, cardiovascular health, and then a product called Eon, which is a very powerful anti-inflammatory. It was about this time in the late 2000s that I started to invest money in stem cell research. And initially, I wanted to look at doing this with a complex blend of electromagnetic and non-electromagnetic energy. So basically, have one device that could blend a transverse wave with a longitudinal wave and use this to activate the stem cells in the human body. And this resulted in over 70 patents in this area. It was actually not too far from you, relatively speaking. We did much of this work at the National University of Ireland in Galway, working with Dr. Tim O'Brien at the Regenerative Medicine Institute. But essentially, what we found was that we could take the stem cells from a person over the age of 60, expose them to this novel field, and the stem cells would start to behave like younger, healthier cells. The issue became that we would need to get this regulated as a medical device, have it used in a clinic or hospital. It would be very expensive, and it wouldn't be available to people on a daily basis as for anti-aging. So when I went back and I looked over the data and I looked at third-party studies to see how can I leverage what we've done here into a device that would be inexpensive that consumers could use. And that's when I found the body of work from Dr. Lauren Picard. So Dr. Picard had spent decades looking at the relationship between copper peptide and cell rejuvenation. And there was even data showing that copper peptide would activate the p63 gene, which is associated with stem cell proliferation. Copper peptide also appears to act like a Yamanaka factor. So it will induce the conversion of the stem cells in our skin over to pluripotent stem cells and then increase the number of circulating stem cells in the blood. So my interest in copper peptide is that it occurs naturally. It declines with age. When we increase copper peptide levels, we accelerate wound healing, improve immune function, and it will a very powerful anti-aging. It will reset 4,000 genes or so to a more youthful state. So that's what initially captured my interest.
Okay, because you also mentioned P63, and then a lot of people have heard of P53. And would you like to talk about that relationship? Just because some people, as soon as they hear the word P53 or even P63, they get confused and think, oh no,
Right.
that's a cancer or a tumor promoter. And maybe if you want to discuss that aspect a little bit more.
Yeah, for people that want to dig in on this, Dr. Picard has a number of studies which actually address this, which show that copper peptide, the GHK form, is going to upregulate expression of P53, and in the process, it regulates cell division and also induces apoptosis in unhealthy tissue. So Dr. Picard formed the conclusion, I believe correctly, that copper peptide can be used in cancer therapy. And in fact, today, is it exactly used that way? Another thing that he found in his research, which we found in ours that we don't make claims about, is that copper peptide has a very powerful effect on the health of the immune system. And we see that it can regulate the inflammatory response as well as increase antioxidants in the body, and in fact acts as an antioxidant. So the very character and behavior of copper peptide is very much one of promoting health and vitality in the body.
On that subject about copper, because there is a pairing with iron, and I was just wondering if there's a possibility that the copper peptide or copper can discourage ferritin from releasing unbound iron, which we know is pro-oxidative. It suffocates the mitochondria, and iron overload is a huge health problem. Is there anything you can elaborate or add to that?
Yeah, actually, I became first interested in this. I have maybe an interest in health and weightlifting and natural supplements, and some of the golden era bodybuilders used to use back in the 60s and the 70s liver as desiccated liver as a popular supplement. And unfortunately, some of them, like Larry Scott, later in his life developed Parkinson's disease, and it's believed that it was caused from his consumption of liver. and the increases in iron in the body. So about maybe 2 years ago or so, I had seen a medical doctor discuss this clinically on the use of copper peptide at sequestering iron in the body. And so what appears to happen is that the copper peptide will bind with ferritin channels and inhibit iron, acting as a free radical. So this again gets back to the antioxidant properties of the copper peptide.
That's fascinating. Also, before you mentioned longitudinal waves, and then a DNA can emit longitudinal waves and ultraviolet light. So maybe if you want to go a little bit deeper into the physics of the patch, because also it's got crystals in it, and that's something people think's woo, but it's not at all. Crystals are used everywhere in technology, and I was just curious about the patents on the patches and whether the crystal type and orientation and the physics behind the crystals in there is part of the patent. So maybe if you want to enlighten us.
Wow, there's a lot there to unpack.
Sorry, yeah.
And no, it's totally okay. I suppose there's a number of different directions that we could go in with this. First, maybe it would be important to discuss a little bit about the structure of the DNA and what is the source of this light. So back in the 90s, I was working on a novel type of battery. It was neither a secondary or a primary battery. It was a totally new type. And you would recharge this battery with heat. In the process, I was looking to generate more power and use the technology to create a hybrid between a battery and a fuel cell. And in one of the experiments that I was doing, I was generating hydrogen, and I would take a flame over this water solution to make sure that the hydrogen was being evolved. And on this one experiment, the flame got sucked into the water. And I knew right away that I had created monoatomic hydrogen. Wow. And that we were seeing an implosion as opposed to an explosion. And this led to an entirely other line of research in exploration about how we could use monoatomic hydrogen for energy production. And so when we think of hydrogen as a gas, it's H2. So there's two atoms of hydrogen that are bound. But in monoatomic hydrogen, which is rare, it can be created under the right circumstances. We just get a free atom of hydrogen. And the behavior of monoatomic hydrogen is very different than normal hydrogen gas. And why is this important? Well, because on our DNA, holding DNA together are going to be hydrogen bonds that exist right at the center of the DNA, and they counter-rotate to one another. And we did an experiment in our labs where we created a hydrogen plasma and then used magnetic fields to counter-rotate the hydrogen plasmas relative to one another, and you get light emission. So in other words, right in the center of our DNA, we have light coming from the ether. And these are highly coherent pulses of light. In addition, to make this mystery maybe even a little bit more interesting, when I was in Atlanta doing this work, down at Georgia Tech, they took a vacuum chamber and believed they were using mass spectrometry. And what they saw was that hydrogen atoms would spontaneously appear in the vacuum. So it's kind of like the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and something came from nothing. There appears to be scientific evidence that that is exactly the case, that out of the vacuum comes matter. So these things are important because they point a direction to how we can get abundant energy right from the environment, and how we can utilize light to influence our health. So when we talk about longitudinal waves, essentially what I was trying to do, which I later created into a toroidal form of DNA called the double helix conductor, is that we take electricity, we run it through an inductor that's twisted into the form of the DNA, and depending on how the coil is wound, we can get forces that are counter to one another. And as these fields cancel, they produce a longitudinal wave. Some people refer to them as a scalar wave, but regardless, it's a compression wave. And based on the design, you can either get complete cancellation or you can have an electromagnetic component that is present. And these things occur naturally in the human body. So I created a device that we built here in our lab to do this, and we found that using this type of technology, we can dramatically increase protein synthesis so that people heal more rapidly. Not sure that answers your question completely, because I did go off a little bit on a tangent.
Oh, no, it's fine. Because I suppose with making the hydrogen, it's non-destructive charge collapse. So it's something that there's somebody else going to explain, because the idea of something coming out of the ether will have blown people's minds. But I think the gist of it, and then I think the last part of that question was how do the crystals in the LifeWave patch, because just for people listening, we're going to go back to some easy things in a moment. We just wanted to dive deep into the science because the patch itself looks so simple, but I wanted people to understand what really is going on behind all of your technology. So I think it's back to just the crystals now in the patch.
Sure. Yeah. So I had been working on a turbine engine, and in the turbine engine, we had a combustor that created a novel vortex flow. And what was interesting about this turbine engine is that it could run on virtually any fuel. And usually a turbine has to be tuned to a specific fuel, but in this one, it could run on anything. And it did this through a vortex flow. And I had my lab up at the time in Dahlonega, Georgia, which was the site of the gold rush in the United States. So I would have this beautiful drive every day around Lake Lanier up into the mountains of Georgia. And I was driving home one day and I got this thought that there had to be a vortex flow within human cells, and that we would be able to use this as a communications channel. So I spent some time trying to think about exactly how would we do that. So I immediately started to look at different types of amino acids and sugars with the thought that we know that the optical properties of stereoisomers are to bend light one way or the other. So essentially, I thought if I could process these materials in a way so as to create circular polarization of light, that we could essentially induce a vortex flow with light above the body that would establish a communications channel with the cell, and at the right wavelengths, trigger a biochemical effect. So that's the genesis of the idea and the concept.
Okay, because my last sort of technical question in this category was, are there any holographic properties to the patches?
I would say that would be a bit of speculation. I would say hypothetically, we could say that when cells first replicate, when DNA will unzip, that there is a hologram of the cell that it's going to create that exists in open space, and essentially matter adheres to that hologram. I don't know if that's ever been proven, but I know I've heard that hypothesis. So if that's true, then you could say that, yes, the patches would interface with that holographic light, but it's purely hypothetical and it's nothing we've studied.
Okay. I think going back to sort of daily life reasons that people use the patches, that with the X39 and then the X49, I particularly like the X49 because we were talking about this by email for doing sports, but then I've found that that combination together has an influence on a lot of thyroid function, and it improves it in people who've had terrible thyroid for decades. So would you like to now move people into the X49 and its properties and energy and this subject? I think also you mentioned you've just got a new study out on athletes and the X49.
We actually, last night, I was really excited. We had a study that was lasting over a year, and we just got the results last night. And, you never know how these things are going to be turning out, but we were working with a lab here in the United States, and they were doing some very sophisticated testing, but essentially looking at what were going to be the biochemical changes in the cell from using X39, and then what effect would that have on mitochondrial function. So just as an aside, what we found in that study is that X39 increases mitochondrial function, reduces inflammatory cytokines, increases the charge around the cell. But then interestingly, it also induces biogenesis of new mitochondria. And that was something that we didn't know before. So this study was supporting some of our prior data, and then we also learned some new things as well. With X49, we're elevating AHKCU. So this is, I would say, a daughter peptide to GHK. So a good way to think about this is that GHK has a very broad systemic effects on our health in a very positive way, whereas AHK is very much more localized. So AHK is based off of alanine instead of glycine. And there's some interesting things that happen with the alanine pathway in the brain. I'm personally convinced that what we'll find is that the alanine pathway gets disrupted during illness like Lou Gehrig's disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease. That's a subject for a different time. So AHK, given that it is composed of alanine, is going to have an influence on the health of the brain, the heart, and the muscle, very much in a similar way that we would with carnosine, which is also another alanine peptide. But the actions, of course, of AHK have some surprising benefits. So, for example, one of the things that was learned independently in other study work is that AHK is more effective than minoxidil at hair growth. Doesn't work for everyone, though. And so we get these insanely dramatic before-after photos from people in Japan that wear X39 and X49, and people have gone from being completely bald to a full head of hair. But there seems to be something dietary or genetic where it won't work for everyone. So that's kind of an interesting effect. We also found, which I found surprising, is that AHK can induce osteogenesis and also inhibit bone loss. So we did a study on that with doctors Melinda and Caitlin Connor, and that was the result of that study. But for athletes, essentially, I wanted to see if AHK would play a similar role to carnosine in acting as a mild anabolic. So we did a study with X39, X49, and essentially what we found was that both were capable of improving athletic performance, but entirely different ways, and they would complement one another. So that maybe is a summary.
Okay, that's great. And is there anything before I hand you over to Dr. Rachel, who has some questions about her heart and thyroid as well, and also people who've I'm not sure the best way to say who are paraplegic or quadriplegic that have regained mobility. So I'll let Rachel ask her side from the clinician perspective.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful to speak with you, David. And just before we move on to that, just along the lines of the X49, just for listeners that I've had a lot of questions about the X49, because the X39 people think of as the stem cell patch, and then the X49 increasing a daughter copper peptide, as you said, to increase the AHKCU. Is there any, and it's found more specifically in brain, heart, muscle, and bone, is there any specificity or connection with stem cells in those areas with the X49, or is there no connection at all for the X49 increasing stem cells in those areas?
Yeah, I don't think we have any evidence that AHK will directly influence stem cell behavior, but there is an indirect correlation. So, for example, if we were to look at BDNF, we know that BDNF will release brain-derived neurotrophic factor, will cause a release of stem cells in the brain. And BDNF is regulated by GABA. And GABA is going to be very much, levels of GABA are very much going to be dependent on levels of inflammatory stress in the brain. So if we can induce antioxidant activity in the brain, we can support healthy levels of GABA, BDNF, and stem cell activity. So the way I would look at this then is that antioxidants like AHK and carnosine, which reside in the tissues of the brain, can create an environment for healthy stem cell activity. We know that stem cells, on the one hand, are going to be attracted to inflammatory cytokines, but with aging, where there is a decrease in most people in levels of antioxidants, now you have a phenomena that's referred to as inflammaging, which is chronic inflammation. So if we can keep the levels of antioxidants on our body at youthful levels, we can, I believe, hold off some of the diseases that might be normally associated with aging and preserve our regenerative capabilities by protecting the stem cells.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And as Dr. Sara was saying about my curiosity about the heart, just a brief background, I was an anesthesiologist for close to 20 years, and I left clinical practice in 2021. And I started looking out. I was very, I would call it indoctrinated. I started looking outside of allopathic medicine when my mom was diagnosed with cancer in 2017. And it really wasn't until 2020 that I started to understand everything at a much deeper level. And I only discovered these patches, well, I think I discovered them about a year ago. I hadn't investigated further, wasn't taught anything about light in my traditional medical education. That came just a couple of years ago, and that's how I connected with Dr. Sara as well. And then I only came to start with LifeWave and the patches this last May. So May of 2024, as my mom's health started to decline significantly. She's 83, quite a few medical issues, one of them being her heart. She's got heart failure, atrial fibrillation, and a few other things. And she told me her doctors were looking at heart surgery. So knowing that what I'd seen in 30 years, I didn't want her to go through that if she didn't have to. And it was just timely that I found these patches. And so I told her, she was very open, thankfully, because sometimes family can be not necessarily open.
Understood.
And so we started them. And as well, knowing from the background, I knew we'd have to be patient. And I kept telling her, let's just give it a full 9 months to a year. Don't make any judgments. And we would go for walks daily she would become short of breath. Like every couple of steps, she'd have to catch her breath. And within 2 weeks, she was walking significantly faster, talking to me, and walking on an incline. And I literally had to stop her and say, do you understand what is happening? She wasn't even kind of paying attention. But I still, I mean, I've never seen that in my career without some kind of artificial device being inserted into a heart. Is there any, I mean, I can tell you about the thyroid afterwards, but is there any, can you share or enlighten us as to how that might be possible, that it can happen that quickly?
So, normally we would think of protein synthesis as having a number of very significant biological limits, right? So we're going to, if we look at the activity of the endoplasmic reticulum and the availability of energy in the mitochondria to support creation of new proteins, especially collagen, there's a number of natural regulators. And one of these regulators, if we look at the cycle, if we look at the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, we see two very important molecules in nitric oxide and glutathione. And both of these interplay with one another. So on the one hand, nitric oxide can cause an increase in mitochondrial function. But on the other hand, if we make too much energy and there's not enough glutathione, this leads to undue oxidative stress. And now we have a negative feedback loop. So the amount of energy in the mitochondria is going to decrease. So the significance of this is quite important when we look at regeneration of damaged tissue, recovery, and especially the age reversal phenomena. If we were to take acetyl L-carnitine and lipoic acid, and we were to administer this as a supplement, Bruce Ames was the one, I think, that did the pioneering work at this in California. And what we find is that lipoic acid and acetyl L-carnitine can increase mitochondrial energy, but the cells start to resemble younger, healthier cells. We can take a different pathway and now increase, let's say, administer ozone into the cell along with either NAD or an NAD precursor, and we get a similar phenomena, is that the net amount of energy in the cell increases and the cells start to revert to younger, healthier cells. So this is extraordinarily important because if our goal, let's say we were to establish a goal, and the goal is we want people to stay young and healthy and be completely resistant to disease. We'd first look at a biological model for that. I happen to look at lobsters because I think they're an excellent model for biomimetics. We could use clams. There's mollusks that live to be over 500 years old and they don't suffer any type of inflammatory stress. They have complete control over the inflammatory process, but it does come back to a natural balance between the oxidative and the antioxidant system. So I'm taking a little bit of a roundabout way to talk about this, but whether or not we talk about the health of the heart, the kidneys, the thyroid, it all really comes back to what is going on in the mitochondria, because if energy is being increased, that means the genes will start to revert to a younger, healthier state. Some of this, there's good studies on exercise, how when people go out and they exercise, they do resistance training, and now they start to make more mitochondria in their muscles. They reset about 76 genes to a more youthful state. So again, we see this connection between energy output and gene expression. So with all of the patches, they have an influence on mitochondrial function, but each one, of course, approaches it a little bit differently for a specific benefit. In the case of X39, which is by far our most powerful patch, we get a multitude of benefits because its central primary benefit is in acting as a gene modulator, resetting genes to a more youthful state. But it also acts as an antioxidant. It also acts as an electron donor and can support mitochondrial health. It'll induce biogenesis, apparently, and help to support creation of new mitochondria. So once this occurs, now there's more cellular energy currency and more energy is available for tissue repair. It gets a little bit more complex when we start to use multiple diagnostics in our studies to evaluate what's going on. So my preferred way of doing studies is to take biochemical markers and combine them with energetics so we get a fuller picture. So we can do a urine analysis and see what the biochemical changes are going to be. But if we have an infrared camera on someone, we can see where the inflammation is being reduced. And if we use technologies like BioWell, heart rate variability, biopulsar, we can see the bioelectrical changes in the organs and we can know what's being influenced. And historically, when we've used techniques like electrointerstitial scanning, we do see, in fact, that you apply a patch and this has an influence on the health and the function of the heart. So there's a lot more detail to dig down into this, but suffice it to say, in summary, you put a patch on, it increases energy output in the mitochondria. This allows for greater protein synthesis. The flow of bioelectrical current in the body is improved. You get a relaxation response in the autonomic nervous system. You get more synchronicity in the muscle contractions in the heart as measured by HRV. And now you've provided an environment for the heart to heal.
I want to thank my sponsor, Chroma, who help me deliver free content for you and allow me to have great guests on the show. Your light environment shapes your health, but modern lighting, it's ruining your sleep, affecting your mood, and disrupting your metabolism. Chroma engineer precision lighting solutions the way nature intended, precise, powerful, and built to last. For example, the Sky Portal, which is designed to align your circadian rhythm, boost mental clarity, and improve your mood. With an output of over 10,000 lux, it mimics natural outdoor lighting and helps prevent seasonal alteration disorder, or SAD. The Chroma D light, which delivers UVB at a precise wavelength so that your body makes natural full-spectrum sulfated vitamin D, which is needed for immune health, bone health, hormonal balance. Supplements can't replace what light does best. The Vitalux goes beyond red light therapy, combining red light, near-infrared, violet, and cyan light to stimulate opsins, which are key light-active proteins that influence metabolism, brain function, and mitochondrial efficiency. Then there's the Iron Forge, a very affordable portable red light device delivering over 80% near-infrared light for deep tissue repair, recovery, and better mitochondrial function. For a brighter tomorrow, upgrade your light, upgrade your life. Use code DRSARA for a discount on all Chroma products. The link's in the description.
No, I really appreciate that. It helps me understand, and then not that I could explain that to my mom, but it helps me understand that, yeah, and be able to explain it to colleagues as well who seem baffled by the rapidity and the simplicity of, it's not simple, but seemingly simple technology. So along those lines, within 3 weeks, she actually came to my house with some lab work, and I told her that she had to go to her own doctor, that I wasn't going to be her doctor, but I wouldn't be surprised if he lowered her thyroid medication. And sure enough, he lowered her thyroid medication. And I've heard now countless stories of people getting off their thyroid medications. So I don't know if there's anything beyond what you've just described to explain a little more about why that might happen, or if that is kind of tied in with what you just.
Yeah, it would tie in, but I think what I would want to say, because I don't want to lean too far over to one side on this, is that it is critically important that people balance out the energy systems with the biochemistry. So, meaning we still need to focus on having a healthy diet, supplement where necessary, exercise, get plenty of rest, hydrate, do all these things that we know are important in our health. And then using tools like the patches, we can optimize our benefits. We're doing a study now that I think is going to finish by maybe the end of the summer. I'm hoping to present the results at our conference in October. But we're going to have people wear X39 and X49 and only do 50 seconds of exercise per week. And we want to show that you can still build muscle and burn fat in the process. So that's something that we're exploring. But on the nutrition side, especially when we look at the health of the thyroid, does the person have enough iodine in their diet? Most people are iodine deficient. Maybe they need to supplement with tyrosine, as that is going to form T3 and T4. In the case of the heart, if someone has cardiovascular disease, if they have high blood pressure, I'll always recommend that they speak with their doctor about magnesium supplementation, taurine supplementation, nattokinase, these things to clear out, even something as simple as garlic, to clean out the arterial plaque and help to control the inflammatory response. Taurine in and of itself is amazing, in that studies are showing that it is more effective than pharmaceutical drugs at reducing blood pressure. So anyone with high blood pressure should be looking at these options.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I love that you started out by saying basically that this is a tool. It's not a replacement for a lifestyle, for your lifestyle. And I know, because in my household, one of the members of my household asked, I shared that I wanted her to use the patch, that she said, does that mean I can eat junk food? Doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work that way. We're doing these experiments now. We have a study, and we want to see how quickly people can build muscle, reduce body fat. And so in going back and forth with the researchers, I was like, okay, well, for somebody like me that weighs over 200 pounds, I need to get 200 grams of protein per day if I'm going to build additional muscle, providing I've got the exercise stimulus. And the researchers are having a really difficult time, kind of with that concept. But this is to say, and we've worked with a lot of bodybuilders and athletes over the years, but it definitely very much comes down to this, that if you're not giving your body the raw materials that it needs, we can't expect to heal or have optimum health. So it's really critical part.
Absolutely. I agree.
Sorry, Rachel.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to ask this one last question and say I want to be mindful of time. And I know Dr. Sara is the one who's conducting this, but one more clinical scenario that comes up quite a bit that I get asked about, and I have my speculation as to why, but when it comes to people who have organ transplants and they're on anti-rejection medications for the reason to be able to support that organ, but it's not recommended. As I understand, it's not recommended. They use the patches, and my understanding would be that the X39, for example, would be increasing your immune system, the health of your immune system, therefore maybe contribute to more potential for rejection. I just didn't know if you had any sort of further.
Yeah, we get asked this question, not quite a bit, but we've been asked this question certainly before. And we haven't performed, for ethical reasons, a clinical study where we are administering the patches to people in a clinical environment where they've had an organ transplant, because the potential for rejection is there. Now, I have had people over the years tell me, well, I had an organ transplant, I use X39 and I feel great. And it's like, okay, well, that's anecdotal and I'm glad you're okay, but we still can't recommend it. So I think what I would say is, in science, there's always so many unknowns. And I think if I were to form a hypothesis, I would say that wearing any of the patches, because they do improve immune function, would be a high risk for people with organ transplants. But on the other hand, when you're working with light, sometimes the outcomes are not what you expect. So we've seen, I think, in real life, the results are different. But because we haven't done a clinical study in this area, we still would say, no, don't do it. There's a risk.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would that be the only situation where you would say, don't do it? And I ask that because
we legally have to say that if you have a medical condition, you have to get approval from your doctor before using the patches. There's certainly in oncology, many oncologists feel like you don't want to take antioxidants prior to chemotherapy, especially glutathione, because they feel that it's going to protect the cancerous tissue from radiation or the chemotherapy. So I don't personally agree with that, but from the perspective of the company, we have to defer medical advice to the experts.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
When you were describing studying people and biophotonics, you mentioned the BioWell. Do you mean Dr. Konstantin Korotkhov's gas discharge technology? Is that because we're going to now move into the other patch, the Alavida, because this gets into interesting things like cognition. People have reported lucid dreams and out-of-body experiences, and then people who don't know Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, he's done lots of studies on auras, and we can call it the cold plasma if you want the scientific word. So shall we dovetail into the Alavida patch now, because this has got some sort of interesting potential as well?
Sure. Yes, and I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Korotkov once at a BioWell conference, and a wonderful human being, as you probably know, really kind-hearted. And it's the BioWell and GDV have been incredible tools that researchers that we've worked with who have used it over the years to validate the efficacy and performance of our patches. So as a research tool, we really like it quite a bit.
Yeah, Dr. Krotkov's coming on the podcast, so we'll be very happy he got mentioned. But now if we talk about, say, the Alavida patch, and because it sort of has, in my eyes, it's scientific, but also this is now delving into some spirituality or otherworldliness. So maybe if you want to walk people through the Alavida so they can understand why I'm smiling about it.
Well, you've noticed the Iron Man figures back over here. And so I am definitely a superhero fan. And I suppose from when I was very young, I would fantasize about, what kind of superpower, would I like to have? And I have tried to look at some of the biochemistry or biophysics behind telekinesis and psychic phenomena. Some of these peptides that are released have such a short half-life that with current technology, we can't capture exactly what's going on. But someday I believe we'll have the tech to do that. So the story with Alavida was to look at really whether or not I could create a patch that would elevate epithalamine or epitalon, depending on how people know it. And this work, of course, was done in Russia, and by extracting different peptides from the pineal and also from the thyroid gland. And what was interesting to me about epithalamine is that, number one, it would enhance the function of the thyroid. It would improve the immune response by a factor of 3 to 5 over baseline, and that it also appeared to have some very powerful anti-aging effects, as well as lengthening the telomeres. So the goal of this was really to see if we could produce a product to lengthen telomeres and improve immune function. And however, as you correctly stated, as part of the research process, I thought, okay, let's put the patch over here because that'll link into the pineal gland and maybe we'll get a stronger effect. And people in our test group started to say that they were leaving their bodies and at night and having other effects as well. So it appears that we did activate the pineal gland. Yeah.
But also, I think this is really important because a lot of people can't meditate. And I think I asked you beforehand about would it help people meditate? And then on a very much deeper spiritual level, if it could help people connect to, I'll just call it the consciousness greater than our own or God or source, just because in terms of longitudinal waves and lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences and spiritual connections, there is a big link. Do you think, other than being able to help, because epithalamine helps sleep, skin, it's antioxidant, could it also help people with being able to reconnect on some kind of spiritual level to whatever they want to try and connect to? Sorry, I'm just trying to be polite and respectful that lots of people might be of a different religion, but I think it's it's an important subject because people are very much lost connection with all of these things, and I think it's something that is an important aspect of science now, because there's not really any difference between the physics that controls biochemistry and what controls our consciousness. People seem to think they're two different things when they're not.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject because the spiritual realm exists outside of our universe, if we want to look at it on a technical level. Yet the extraordinary thing about human beings is that the physical can interface with the spiritual. It's the way we were designed. It's the way we were created. So the question is, how do we all do that? I studied the Bible from the perspective of wanting to be a better person, learning life lessons, but also the gematria. And I look for codes within the Bible. And so, for example, one of the things that's interesting is that when Adam and Eve, when they fell from grace, it was said that their eyes were open. Well, this to me is very unusual because we think of knowledge as residing in the brain. So was this to be taken literally, or is this just a metaphor? And I wanted to look at this literally. And I'm answering your question, by the way. And this actually has to do with some of our future research. But the eyes contain the 4 amino acids that are chromophores. So that's going to be tyrosine, tryptophan, phenylalanine, and histidine. And we would expect to see this in the eyes and the brain, that you have materials that can absorb light and pass on the energy and light to other tissue. But the implications to this are pretty extraordinary. So if we go back to the subject of Alavita and the pineal gland, we know, of course, for thousands of years, it's been recognized as really the center of the brain and the link to God. And, today we've done a magnificent job of messing that up by fluoridating the water and calcifying the pineal. So back maybe almost 20 years ago now, it was around 2005, we worked with a neurologist, this fellow Michael Collins, at the University of Tennessee. And we did some studies, and bear in mind, back then we were just using the energy patches, and we were placing the patches around the head. And we wanted to see what the response would be on an EEG. And we did this one protocol. I was on a conference call one day, and I was looking at a 3D model with the acupuncture meridians on it. And I thought, I see a pyramid around the head. I see the point at the back where energy shoots out the pineal as being the tip of the pyramid. And then I'm looking at these access points on the temples in the front of the head. So I said to Michael, could you place energy patches over, there would be these points right over here, white on right, tan on left, and then in the front and the back, and one on top. And he did that, and he said, the EEG readings show that the left and right brains are going into synchronicity, and that it would take 20 years of practicing meditation to get to this kind of level. And so over the years, we've learned how to modify that protocol, and with the Eon patch and the Alavita patch. But to your point, Eon, Alavita are going to produce a relaxation response in the body, allowing the body to be calmer. And Alavita specifically will turn on the pineal gland, which is critical for processing light and, scientifically speaking, activating a vortex that exists above our heads, which we can hypothesize is a link that we have to God the Almighty.
Wow, that's fascinating. But also I think it's like encompassed other things of fascination, like pyramids and antenna and outer worldliness. So I think this now leads us into the last part, which is the idea of your light water, and how did you think that up? Because it got 5 patents really quickly, and I think the right word in my head is biological transmutation. And we were chatting a little bit about it beforehand, just to reassure people it's not Kangen and it doesn't have electrodes. It's a totally new technology regarding water and light. And water, as we know, is one of these other sacred substances. What water is, I still really don't know. But do you want to talk a bit about this particular technology? Because it's coming out, I think, in the US. Is it July, or is it out already, or is it about to come out?
It will have a small number of units that are coming out in April.
Okay.
For the very top brand partners that we have in the US, and then the official rollout is in July. That's when we get our inventory. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this technology has been so much fun to work on over the past 6-7 years now, and it came from we were in our lab using this device to create electromagnetic and longitudinal waves. And we did an experiment because we were seeing tissue regeneration that was extraordinarily fast, faster than what the cells should be capable of. And so I had a hypothesis that we were embedding electrons under the valence shell in atoms. And so to test this, I thought, okay, let's get a very simple crystal system and grow crystals in the presence of these fields. And if they grow faster than in the control, then we see that this is having an influence on matter. And that's exactly what happened. So then I thought, okay, I want to try another experiment. And we took tin and we put it on a hot plate. And we did this because tin has a low melting point. And what we did was we combined it with oxygen to get a tin oxide, which is just a gray metal. In the test, we took this electromagnetic and longitudinal field, exposed it to the tin, and allowed the surface to form a pacification layer with oxygen. And this time, it turned into something that looked like gold. So I thought, okay, let's take these samples now. We sent them out to a lab in the US called EAG Eurofins. They did X-ray diffraction, compared it to 60,000 other materials, and they said, you've got a completely unique material here that you've created, never existed before. And what we had done was we had able to change the bond angle between the metal and the oxygen. So then my thought was, hydrogen has a metallic state. So if we could take water, separate it into hydrogen and oxygen, and insert energy into the metal, the hydrogen, as it's binding back to oxygen in the presence of a catalyst, we could have an entirely new type of water that never existed before. And then the question is, well, what type of energy do we want to insert into those bonds? We had been involved in experiments looking at planaria, hydractinia, ants, lobsters, and I was trying to uncover why is it that lobsters don't age? So long story short, I found spectrophotometry data in lobster blood. I found a living code of ratios of one wavelength of light to another that ended up being in the first sentence of the book of Genesis. And I took these 6 different wavelengths of light, processed the hydrogen and oxygen in the presence of a catalyst with these wavelengths of light, and out came a new species of water. We validated this by looking at how when you phase change the water from liquid into ice, how that energy is released and you get these novel repeatable ice patterns. And then, of course, we did now 6 clinical studies to show that when you drink this water, the body starts to change in 15 seconds. You get measurable changes in the blood, the urine, and the bioelectrical activity in the body, increase in collagen production, increase in muscle protein synthesis, starting within 15 seconds of drinking this water.
What's the proposed mechanism? Because for me, I mean, I can't say I'm an expert on water or platonic solids or hydrogen or vortices, but the idea of what you've just said, my mind is exploding. But I think for people who are not quite sure the implications of this, how to a layperson could you describe what you've made and what it'll do?
So first, we would look at water as being a liquid crystal. And one of the things that we know about crystals is that they have definable, repeatable patterns. But what's interesting about water that's different than other crystals is that it's pliable and it's changeable. And that means that water as a crystal is capable of storing information. And in this particular case, what you would say is the photons, as being electromagnetic energy, are being stored in coherent oscillating domains between water molecules. And as such, this almost acts like a computer media where we would store information electromagnetically. And once the water enters the body and the water is metabolized, those coherent domains go away and the water is released. So I would say that that would be my hypothesis as to the mechanism of action. What we know for certain is that when we process the water, we can get these repeatable structures that form in ice. And most importantly, when people drink the water, 100% of the population has measurable, statistically significant improvements in their health.
Okay, because I think a lot of people on this channel will be familiar with making structured water, where you put water out in sunlight with, it has to be piezoelectric, and then you can vortex it or put it on a magnetico. So what you're saying is you've altered the bond angles. You've got this ability to insert way more energy now into the water. And it's sort of, in simple terms, some kind of superstructured water for people who have an understanding already of water physics and geometry and how water contains energy and information. It's not just some wet thing in a glass.
I would say there's a few tricks there that I don't talk about as far as actually how you do some of these things in the machine.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is that there are 6 wavelengths that I found to be absolutely critical to the way lobsters defeat the aging process. And we've been able to process the water in such a way that'll contain those wavelengths of light so that when we drink it, it'll be released and have a biological measurable effect.
Okay, I understand that it's like up and coming technology, but yeah, I love water, so that's like a new addition now to my giant collection of weird waters. So I'll be excited for July. And I'm actually be in the US in July, so I might be able to get some. This is quite a random question because you clearly know a huge amount about hydrogen, about charge collapse, about the ether or counter space and space. With deuterium, do you know anything about deuterium at a level of sort of beyond sort of simple things which people know why they shouldn't eat deuterium, but anything about energetics of deuterium, if it can emit light, if you squash it, and what's it for, and why on a very sort of like deep physics level is it here, and why is it different from hydrogen?
Wow, that's an interesting question. So first, yeah, let's not talk about deuterium depleted water. Because that'll go down a rabbit hole,
Yeah,
and certainly
yes.
plenty of information there.
Yeah,
So
or deuterium breaking ATPases and things like that, or blocking
yeah,
TCA. Yeah, so it's yeah, exactly. There's plenty of
yeah,
info. Yes.
yeah. So first, I would say what some of the things that we do. I have a separate business that's connected to LifeWave on drones. If you haven't seen that, we have a 15-foot wingspan drone that we're going to be using to deliver patches to people in emergency situations. And we have developed here an entirely new method for generating power that's clean and abundant for these drones. And normally a large military drone would fly about 24 hours maximum. Our drones can fly over 40 hours. So we're doing something really special with them. And in evaluating this subject of hydrogen and deuterium, if we use hydrogen and we place it in the correct catalytic system, we can extract enormous amounts of energy. And deuterium, we can actually get more energy, but it requires a slightly different catalytic system. For people that are, in the interest of time, for the people that are interested in that, I would recommend they go back and look at the work of Randall Mills. And essentially, I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Mills in the 90s before his work was suppressed. But essentially what he was saying was that you could take an electron and move it closer to the proton. And this is really big taboo stuff in physics because the distance from the proton into the electron is so well defined. But under the right conditions, if it occurs in a gaseous phase with the correct catalytic system, you get enormous energy release as well as novel compounds being formed. So things that we take for granted every day, like the small amounts of 80, 120 parts per million of deuterium in water, there's enormous amounts of energy there. The same is true with seawater. We have created reactions in our lab with seawater that are hard to believe. Hydrogen has 34,000 watt hours per kilo of energy, compared to something like diesel, which is about 11,000 watt hours per kilo. And you can't really use hydrogen, though, in practical sense, because you have to store it as a gas and then you lose that density advantage. But what's remarkable about seawater is we've been able to generate about 100,000 watt hours per kilo of energy with some of our devices. And it's clean, great for the environment, safe, abundant, but there's, I think, certain interests that would not want that.
Okay, that's so just in simple terms, the deuterium isn't for biological organisms, it's for technology. And it's something that we don't understand, because that's why I wanted to ask about the deuterium, is that in some ways, biologically, it depletes our energy. I want to thank my sponsor, Lightwater Scientific, who helped me deliver free, valuable information to you and also allow me to have great guests on this channel. Lightwater Scientific produce the purest and most deuterium-depleted water in the world. Depleting or lowering your deuterium has numerous health benefits, from better metabolic health, more energy, greater resilience, less brain fog, increased physical performance, enhanced healing, and healthier mitochondria. Deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen, also known as heavy water, because it's bigger and heavier than regular hydrogen. Even though deuterium makes up only 0.02% of hydrogen, it's found everywhere. Deuterium is a burden to your body because it interferes with the intricate chemical reactions that occur by slowing them down. Deuterium is kryptonite to your mitochondria, and we need healthy mitochondria to produce energy. There's over 60 years of scientific research on the negative effects of too much deuterium on health, and also the positive benefits of lowering deuterium in the body. Lightwater deuterium-depleted water is 100% safe and non-toxic. In fact, it's the closest in structure to the metabolic water that your mitochondria produce. Lightwater deuterium-depleted water comes in 5 or 10 parts per million glass or plastic bottles, so level up your health by leveling down your deuterium today. The purchase link is in the show notes, and use code DRSARA for a discount off your order. But in terms of using it in nuclear reactions or bombs or fuel, there's something about it that it does. This is exactly what we wanted to ask you, is like it's got some kind of extra energy and power, but how did it get that? And in terms of hydrogens coming out of the ether, if everything can be charged, compressed and squeezed and we get a hydrogen, how did the deuterium arrive?
I'll answer it this way.
Yeah.
Now, from my perspective, so if we have these 4 different layers, monoatomic hydrogen, hydrogen gas, deuterium, and tritium. So we all know what tritium is used for, creation of hydrogen bombs. From my perspective, based on the work that I've done, there's nothing more powerful than monoatomic hydrogen. And the reason for that is that it's how nature extracts energy from the ambient environment, and it does it in a way that is completely clean. You can do this with deuterium, but it's way more complex and requires different catalytic systems that are relatively expensive. Whereas if you work exclusively with monoatomic hydrogen, you can circumvent some of the problems with deuterium. So it's as if when the world was created, God provided all of these different things. We don't have to use just hydrogen or just monoatomic hydrogen or just deuterium. There's lots of options. But the important thing is we can have energy systems that are not going to harm the planet and be great for humanity and have an abundance of energy.
Yeah, that's exactly like you've answered what I was after at the beginning of why is the deuterium here. And I think it's something, sometimes we're given gifts and we misuse them and make a bomb, whereas you're saying that deuterium's got a lot of potential for clean fuel, but because of oil companies and things like that they're very dominant now. So it's just like you said, something that is an availability of abundant clean energy. We're just not allowed to have it.
Yeah, I hope maybe those things are changing. It's really hard. It's really hard to say. But yeah, you could take deuterium as an intermediary step to making tritium, or you could use it as is to make clean and abundant energy. It's that human beings haven't decided that they want to do that. We could go back, 100 years to the Rockefeller family and Morgans and so forth,
Yes.
and look at how that information was suppressed in favor of big oil, right?
Oh, exactly. And then Tesla as well. But that's like a whole great big other rabbit hole. But just for just
Yeah.
just for people, because also the other thing, just so we close, have you got anything else you wanted to add, like some kind of additional message about your company or something we didn't know about it? Because I know you've got like a big passion for improving humanity, or any special advice or messages for the young people, just something, because we're, for people listening, we're like tapping into something like 0.0001 of your brain and your intellect. So if you've got any parting like words of wisdom or anything you want to say.
Well, I think thank you for that. I appreciate that. The younger generation today will be encountering problems that no other generation ever had to deal with before, with the advent of AI, with robotics. Society is going to be changing very rapidly. We have enormous number of health challenges because of all the microplastics in the environment, because of all the pollutants. And the really good news is that there are natural solutions that already exist that we can use for empowering our health, making our own decisions, taking our lives into our own hands. And so, as we look towards the future, I think I want to choose to look at it from the space of having hope that we're going to get through some of these things, and we're going to be freed from some of the things that have held us back in the past, where we can have free energy, we can have health solutions that previously weren't available, and human beings can have the life that they want to live.
Thank you. That's really helpful, because I think a lot of people live in fear now. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. It's been wonderful, and my brain is very happy from all of what you've said. But also, I just wanted to wish you a good trip to Denmark, and to mind out for all the clouds of mad cyclists, because you're off. I think it's very soon on your travels. So wishing you a safe journey for that.
Thank you. I head out. I head out tomorrow. And in January, we were blessed with getting a visit from Prince Joachim of Denmark. We put that out recently on social media, and he came to look at the drones that we have in our hangar there at the test facility. And I've got another surprise that's coming up. I think we'll let our brand partners know in April. I have someone of prominence that I will be meeting with in Europe about our humanitarian drone initiative.
Oh, that's great. So we've got lots to look forward to. Watch this space. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
If you're interested in learning more about LifeWave patches or purchase any products, Dr. Rachel and I run regular Zoom meetings where we can give you the science, describe some testimonials, and also answer any burning questions you have about any of the products, such as the X39, the X49, and anything else that you've heard about in the podcast. The dates and times of these Zoom meetings are in the description, and if you can't make it, the meetings are recorded. There are also direct links to the purchase page if you think the X39 or some of the other patches are something you'd like to try and you want to buy them now. Thank you very much for watching. I have lots of free content, such as PDFs on quantum biology, leptin, as well as a lot of free content on my Substack, so check out the links in the description.